Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dirt Nap City, the show about interesting dead people. I'm Alex. I'm here with my friend Kelly. Kelly, how you been, man?
I'm doing very well, Alex. I'm on a little bit of a vacation at the moment, which is nice. It's been a busy summer so far, so nice to unplug. But, I always got time to talk with you about interesting dead people and dead ends.
Oh, yeah, I got a couple of interesting guys today. I'm doing a two for today. Two for Tuesday.
Those are always interesting because, it's double your pleasure, double your fun.
So some of the doubles ones, I think we started with Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah.
Most recently, the Wright brothers, right? And like the Wright brothers, these dudes were brothers.
Oh, okay.
And like Hanna-Barbera, kind of, and the Wright brothers, kind of, you can't talk about one without the other. They were kind of, you don't even really, there's nothing that I really learned that distinguishes one from the other too much. They kind of did everything together. And
are they known as
Yes.
the Something Brothers?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
But it's not the Chemical Brothers. It's not the Brothers Johnson.
Oh man, you've just taken away my guesses.
But they were German. What are some of the Germans we've had on here? We've had Einstein.
Yeah, we had Diesel.
Yeah, Diesel, Rudolf Diesel, and
Rudolf
Zeppelin. What was his name? What was Zeppelin's name?
Count Baron von.
Baron von. These weren't Baron vons, but these were German brothers, born a year apart, 1785. Jacob was born in 1785, and Wilhelm was born in 1786. And I like doing Germans because you have such a command of the German language.
Yeah.
Having lived there for a little while, vacation there a few times. Jacob died in 1863. Wilhelm died in 1859, and they were born in Hanau, Hesse-Kassel, which is now just Kassel. Back then it was part of the Roman Empire. Now it's Germany. But now if you wanted to go visit their grave, it would be in Kassel, Germany.
Kassel, okay. Is that northern or southern? Do you know?
This was southern Germany.
Okay. Bavaria?
Yes.
Perhaps?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And more importantly, kind of by the Black Forest, I think.
Schwarzwald. Were they... Oh, wait a minute. Were they authors?
Of a sort, yes. A little bit,
Is this the Brothers Grimm?
Brothers Grimm. Let's go.
Wow.
Let's talk about the Brothers Grimm.
As soon as you said Black Forest, that kind of gave it away.
Or as they were known, De Bruder Grimm.
The Bruder Grimm.
The Bruder Grimm. So, like I said, they kind of did everything together, and they weren't as much authors as they were. They were both professors. They were scholars.
Podcast hosts.
Yes, their area of expertise was folklore.
So
some of the most popular stories that we know came from the Brothers Grimm, but they didn't write them.
These were folklore stories.
Right. So there's really not a lot of background about these guys that's very interesting. I'll tell you a little bit. I want to dive right into basically what they collected and kind of what it said about the time that there's not too much, about them being ambulance drivers or hating school or anything like that. Their father died in 1796 when Jacob was 11 and Wilhelm was 10. And, as we've talked about from some of these other folks that lived back then, that when your father dies, that really puts you in a bad situation because then you kind of losing income, right?
Yeah. Stability
puts the family in poverty, which was the case. The family was, you kind of go down a social class. And when you think about it, when we start talking about some of these fairy tales or folk stories, fathers in these stories are idealized and almost
Hmm.
well, and all the villains are females in these stories. You have all the wicked
Really?
mothers and all
Wicked.
the
Wicked
wicked
witches.
stepsisters and stepmothers and witches and frows and all this it's a lot of villains, a lot of female villains, which I think for two guys that lost their father when they were very young, you can't. Now again, they didn't write these stories, but those were the ones that kind of spoke to them.
Okay.
They grew up very close, obviously create experiencing such a trauma at such a young age. You'd become close, and they were both at the top of their classes. I think they both graduated like number one in their class. They went to the University of Marburg, and they both were interested in German folklore. They even lived together. Like even after Wilhelm got married, they Jacob, lived in the house with them.
Hmm.
They shared a desk their whole life, and they were buried side by side. So
Wow.
really, I don't have anything to say about one that I'm not going to also say about the other. I think one of them was more of a linguist, and the other was more of a storyteller. But it doesn't really matter for what I want to talk about today.
Yeah. No, I didn't even know they were real people. I always kind of thought it was a fictionalized. I don't know. I never knew. I've heard of them,
Um,
but didn't know much about them. So well
so
done.
have you ever heard of the literary um, period called Romanticism?
Romanticism. Yeah, I think I've heard of it. I don't know much about it.
So Romanticism was the end of the 18th century in Europe, and it
Okay.
was kind of a response to the Industrial Revolution. So Romanticism and stories and art that was from the Romantic period was all about like appreciation of nature and
Ah,
imagination. And in Germany, that would be a lot about the forest, and the
yeah.
forest being kind of a dark place to avoid. But that was the nature in Germany was the forest, right?
Okay.
There was also um, Romanticism was all about individualism and passion and intuition, and that the learning about yourself and the beauty that the world, that if you look around, the world's a beautiful place, and it evokes these emotional responses. And a lot of the stories had to do with the of nature, but also the supernatural and the fascination with mysterious things and trolls and witches, and like you said, um, and um, and particularly in Germany, uh, people love to talk about the Middle Ages with castles and forests and witches and knights, and these stories. I mean, we're talking about the 1800s here, but those stories really resonated. I think they still do today. I think if you look at like Game of Thrones, people are still interested in Harry Potter. People are still interested in that kind of magic kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but the Brothers Grimm were interested in preserving the stories of the different cultures inside Germany, and that they believed that folk tales were kind of a reflection of the soul of the German people. So they wanted to find that. So their methodology was pretty cool. They would go around collecting stories from people. Now, when they wrote their books, they made it sound like they were collecting stories from like peasants and townsfolk. They were mostly middle class women, and they would ask questions like, "Do you remember any stories your nanny told you when you were growing up?"
I love to ask that question. That's a great sort of icebreaker.
But it wasn't exactly like campfire stories or anything like that. But they would go around and ask different, mostly women, about the stories that were passed to them. And a lot of these were stories that had been passed around for kind of centuries, and they had never been written down. And they found that the culture really had a rich tapestry, I suppose, of stories that kind of people knew, but had never been really written down before. So what they would do is they would take these stories, they would gather them, they would find commonalities, they would edit them, they would embellish them, and they would put out like a book with a collection of stories, pretty short. Each one was like 1,000 to 2,000 words. Um, and they edited 86 stories from 1812 to 1857. And every few years, they'd put out a new edition. There were 7 total editions. That's all they really did, though. Put out 7 books. There was a collection of these fairy tales. I'm going to call them fairy tales. I'm not sure if they ever knew that word. And the very first edition, though, the 1812 version, was the one that I want to focus on, because that was the version that wasn't meant for kids. I think once the books came out, people started reading them as families, and then the kids really got into them. So they responded by every edition after 1812. They sanitized it and made it a little more friendly. And the versions we know today are the Disney versions,
Right.
that started with like Snow White in 1937, 100 years later, that were really, really sanitized. But like I said, the first edition was not meant for kids. They added a lot of like Christian elements and maybe more archetypes. You know, you see these archetypes, the same kind of tropes over and over. We know them as tropes now, but they didn't really, they invented those things, right? There was a lot more sexual content in the 1812 version, but so they softened a lot of the sexual stuff, but then ramped up the violence. The violence was not something that they thought kids shouldn't hear about. In fact, discipline was about fear. So the more violent you could make a story, and if you could throw in a moral to that story of you better not do this or somebody's going to boil you,
right.
or poison you or eat you or burn you alive.
You'll be made into pickled brine.
Or a lot of abandonment kind of things. They were all about that. Now, the word grim already meant like dark. We don't say things are grim because of the Brothers Grimm. Like Grimm with one M was always a word.
Yeah.
But I think they really leaned into that. Like, I think maybe because their name was Grimm, they knew they could go as dark as possible.
Yeah.
And really lean into that name.
Yeah. The brothers Smith or the brothers Jones doesn't have that much cachet as the Brothers Grimm.
I think they did lean into that. They also got rid of anything that was too French. A lot of these stories, their origin is kind of more French. So, something that might have originally taken place in a chateau is now taking place in a castle.
Yeah.
But there were other little changes, like, Snow White. In the original Snow White, the evil queen was her birth mother in the original version.
Okay.
And they changed it to the stepmother later on. They found that changing things to stepmothers made them a lot more morally okay to have that person mess with the kid if they were not related to them.
Right. Not their blood mother, not their,
Which really for the next 200 years made it probably really difficult to be a step parent.
Yeah.
But like I said, the Brothers Grimm were looking for something they called Volksgeist.
Oh, that's people's ghosts?
People's spirit. Yeah.
Spirit. Okay.
Spirit. The kind of to get the spirit of authentic Germans. And like I said, and not French. Because of Napoleon, who was kind of running things at the time, they were very anti-French.
See our episode about Napoleon.
Right. So let's talk about some of the stories. One of them is called Aschenputtel.
Aschenputtel. Is that like black, like ashen?
Aschenputtel.
I don't know what puto is.
Ash Fool or Ash Girl,
okay,
which is Cinderella. Aschenputtel.
Okay.
Cinderella. Cinders would be, like
Cinder. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dressed in yellow. Went upstairs to kiss a fella.
What about Schneewittchen?
Schneewittchen. Schnee is snow. White. Oh, Snow Witch.
No.
Snow White?
Snow White.
Well, white is Vice, but
Schneewittchen. I mean, loosely translated to Snow White.
Is snow, though.
Hansel und Gretel.
Yeah, 2 kids, brother and sister.
Rotkäppchen.
Red Rapunzel?
No.
Rot what?
Rotkäppchen.
Well, Kopf is head, but
or
I don't know.
Cap,
Oh, Red Cap. Who is that?
Little Red Riding Hood.
Rotkopchen.
But it was Little Red Cap Girl or something.
Yeah.
Rumpelstiltskin.
Well, I mean, that was a name, but
Yeah, it's right. It's Rumpelstiltskin, and then Rapunzel was the other one.
wow.
So I can talk about any and all of those. Those are the ones we're going to talk about today, but I'm going to let you pick which one to talk about first.
Well, let's say Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair.
So in the 1812 version of Rapunzel, so do you know the story of Rapunzel? Do you know it like off the top of your head?
She has long hair. She's trapped in a tower, and she lets her hair down so that she can be rescued. The guy can climb up using her hair.
The guy, yeah.
The prince.
Yeah, right. There's always a prince involved, right? It's always damsels in distress and some guy rescues them. And we've talked about what rescue means in previous episodes, right? Right. So in the original Rapunzel, it was very sexual. In fact, she asked the prince, he goes up to visit her a lot. And at one point she asks him, why are my clothes getting so tight? Because she's pregnant. So in the, a man and his wife lived by a walled garden owned by a witch named Frau Goto. And the wife becomes pregnant and craves Rapunzel. And Rapunzel is a salad green in Germany. It's like watercress or something, or kale or something. So the man sneaks into the garden to steal the Rapunzel. And then the second time he does it, the witch catches him. And she spares him. He says, oh, please spare me. This is a very common thing. She says, I'll do it on one condition. That's also very common. You must give me the baby when it's born. Otherwise, I'll kill you.
That's Rapunzel.
So he agrees, and when it's born, the witch names the baby Rapunzel and takes her away. And then when Rapunzel turns 12, Frau Goto locks her in a tower with no doors or no stairs. And whenever the witch wants to visit, she says, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair so I may climb the golden stair. And then she would put down her hair that she had never got cut, and the witch would climb up, and that's how she would see her. Well, a prince overhears this one day, and because princes are always just walking around.
They're just like listening, ear to the ground.
Well, he's enchanted, and he sneaks up, climbs her hair, and they begin a secret relationship. He gets her pregnant. This is again in the original version. Then Frau Gothel finds out that she's pregnant. She cuts off her hair and banishes her to the desert. And then the prince, and she tricks the prince by letting down her hair. He climbs up. She reveals herself. The prince jumps off from the tower in horror and lands in thorns, blinding himself. Then he wanders the desert for years looking for Rapunzel until he finally finds her and the baby. His tears of joy heal his eyes, and they return to the kingdom and live happily ever after.
Wow.
Crazy, huh? Now, and she gave birth to twins, actually, and they reunited. Now, in subsequent versions, they took out the teen pregnancy part. They made it more violent. But big morals, like they added a lot of morals and the idea that, discipline through fear. These stories kept kids in line. You better not, go out on your own or this stuff might happen to you.
Wow. No, I guess I only knew about the letting the hair down part, but I didn't know the rest of that story.
Yeah. Well, and then of course the Disney version, I think in the there's a movie called Tangled. Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There's very little of that,
Yeah.
If I don't know if it's better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah. Yeah. Disney.
Yeah. And maybe don't want Disney doing the original version. It's
no, probably not the right demographic.
All right. So now we got Cinderella, Snow White, Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, and Rumpelstiltskin.
Well, I remember Little Red Riding Hood. She was going to her grandmother's in the forest, and there was a big bad wolf that chased her or talked to her, and then she ends up killing the wolf somehow, right? And putting it in, or maybe the wolf ate her grandmother, and he dresses up like. Am I getting this mixed up?
No, you got it.
He dresses up like her grandmother, and she goes in and says, "Oh, what big eyes you have! All the better to see you with. What big nose you have! All the better to smell you with. What a big teeth you have! All the better to eat you with."
All right, I got a treat for you.
Okay.
I mentioned these are short stories. I've got the original Little Red Riding Hood. I'm going to read it to you.
Okay. I'd love to hear it.
This is the 1812 version called Little Red Cap. Once upon a time, there was a sweet little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother, who would have given her anything. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else. From then on, she was called Little Red Cap. One day, her mother said to her, "Come, Little Red Cap, here's a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take these to your grandmother who is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot and walk nicely and quietly. Don't stray from the path or you might fall and break the bottle. And when you get to her house, don't forget to say good morning and don't go peeping into every corner." "I'll do everything just as you say," promised Little Redcap, and gave her hand on it. Her grandmother lived out in the woods, half a league from the village, and as Little Redcap entered the forest, she met a wolf. She didn't know what a wicked creature he was, so she wasn't afraid of him. "Good day, Little Redcap," said the wolf. "Thank you kindly, Wolf," she replied. "Where are you going so early, Little Redcap?" "To my grandmother's house," she said. "She's sick and weak, and I'm bringing her cake and wine." "And where does your grandmother live?" "A good quarter hour from here, in the woods under the 3 big oak trees. You'll know it by the hazel bushes nearby." The wolf thought to himself, "That young thing is a tender morsel. Better than the old woman. I must be clever and catch them both." He walked a while beside her and said, "Little Redcap, look at the lovely flowers around you. Why don't you look around a bit and listen to the birds, how sweetly they sing? You're walking along as if you were going to school, and it's so beautiful here in the forest." Little Redcap looked up, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing through the trees and the flowers blooming all around, she thought, "Grandmother would like a bouquet too. It's still early and I'll be on time." So she left the path and wandered into the woods picking flowers. Each time she picked one, she saw a prettier one farther on and kept going deeper and deeper. Meanwhile, the wolf took the direct path to the grandmother's house and knocked on the door. "Who's there?" called the grandmother. "Little Redcap," said the wolf, disguising his voice. "I've brought you cake and wine. Open the door." "Lift the latch," called the grandmother. "I'm too weak to get up." The wolf lifted the latch, walked in, and without a word, swallowed the grandmother whole. Then he put on her clothes, laid himself in her bed, and drew the curtains. Later, Little Redcap arrived. She was surprised to find the door open and called, "Good morning." No answer. She stepped inside and felt uneasy. "Dear me," she said, "why do I feel so strange today when I usually love visiting grandmother?" She pulled back the bed curtains, and there lay grandmother, who looked very odd. "Grandmother, what big ears you have!" "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big eyes you have!" "All the better to see you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big hands you have!" "All the better to hug you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what a terribly big mouth you have!" "All the better to eat you with." And with that, the wolf leapt out of bed and swallowed Little Redcap too. Now the wolf, having eaten his fill, lay back down in the bed and fell asleep, snoring loudly. A huntsman happened to be passing by the house. He thought it odd to hear such loud snoring and said, "I'll see if something's wrong." He went in and saw the wolf lying in bed. So here you are, old sinner, said the huntsman. I've been looking for you. He raised his gun, but then stopped. What if he swallowed the old woman whole? Maybe I can save her. So he took a knife and cut open the sleeping wolf's belly. After a few snips, he saw something red, and out popped Little Redcap, crying. How dark it was inside. He cut further, and out came Grandmother, still alive but weak. Little Redcap fetched some large stones, and they filled the wolf's belly with them. When he woke up and tried to run, the stones were so heavy that he collapsed and fell down dead. All three were happy. The huntsman took the wolf's skin. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine and felt much better. And Little Redcap promised herself she would never stray from the path again. The end.
Wow. Moral. Don't stray from the path. That was good. I don't know that I've heard that story in many years.
Super violent.
Yeah.
Cutting the wolf open, and then the grandmother. That is a big ass wolf, first of all.
Yeah. Well, wolves are like that, sure.
And talked.
Not all wolves are bad.
And they don't know talk either.
Dances with Wolves, Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, there's some good ones.
But those were the predators in the forest that you had to watch for back then, right?
Yeah.
So that tells you that, there's a definite moral, very short story. But it's all about, if you do this, there will be consequences. And maybe someone will come and rescue you, but it's going to be grisly. It's going to be grim.
Yeah, grim. That's the word.
But you have to be rescued at that point.
Nice job on the voices, by the way. I really liked I liked the wolf doing the impression of Little Red Riding.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like a character inside a character.
Yeah, you got to go meta on that.
Cinderella. Do you know the story of Cinderella?
Let's see. Dressed in yellow, went upstairs, kissed a fellow, made a mistake, kissed a snake. How many doctors did it take? I think she's the one that went to the ball. She had a wicked stepmother, and she had sisters, wicked stepsisters, and she couldn't go to the ball. But then she met her fairy godmother, who turned a pumpkin into a coach, and she went to the ball, and she dropped her glass slipper, and the prince found it. So,
that's the Disney version.
Okay.
In the 1812 version, there wasn't any fairy godmother. It kind of is a cool beginning. She plants a magical hazel tree on her. Well, her mother. A lot of these stories begin with the mother's not, the mother's dead or the father's dead or whatever. She plants a magical hazel tree on her mother's grave, waters it with her tears, and birds drop silver and gold dresses from the tree. That's really a cool start to the story.
It's a little nature and nurture together.
And it wasn't. Yeah, and back then the animals in the stories were there to sometimes help you, sometimes hurt you, but they were never just singing sidekicks like Disney made it.
Right.
It wasn't just one ball either. It was a 3-night festival. That she would go out every night and try to do this, and she danced with the prince and all that. And then in the original version, when the prince tries to find her using that glass slipper, remember it was the slipper, and
everyone's trying it on.
One of the wicked stepsisters cut off her toe to make the shoe fit.
If the shoe fits, you must acquit.
Isn't that nasty? She cut off her toe to make sure it fit. The other one cut off her heel. I think that's worse than
worse. Yeah.
And the birds, though, were watching that, and they warned the prince, and they say, "Rook-a-da-doo, blood is in the shoe, blood is in the shoe."
Wow, I'll have to rook-a-da-doo.
And then when Cinderella finally gets married at the end, the birds who knew they were trouble, they pecked out the stepsister's eyes as punishment.
Of course.
So the other common theme to all these stories is there's justice, whether it's divine justice or karmic justice. You get yours in the end, but patience also is patience is a virtue, and a lot of these characters have to wait, sometimes entire lifetime, but several years, decades, until somebody gets their comeuppance. But patience is usually rewarded.
But it happens,
but there's punishment to those who deserve it.
So foundation of good lessons, I guess. Foundation of things that are useful for people to know, children to learn.
German children back then were taught about patience was a big thing. That if you're nice and you're patient, that magic and marriage will save you if you're a girl, right? That was kind of the message. The second edition got softened a little bit later, and then Disney introduced the whole idea of the fairy godmother and that animals were kind of cute sidekicks and a whole different deal of the. What about Snow White? You remember Snow White?
So the Seven Dwarves, right? And she went to live in the forest. I actually really think that is one of the. It was one of the original Disney hand-drawn animations. So
it was Disney's first foray into feature length. It was Disney's first feature length animated film, and it was the first of the Brothers Grimm's stories to be made into a movie. 1937.
Hard to think about that as a book or a story because the movie is so prevalent in our culture, and I think it's a beautiful movie. I mean, it's just the animation, the style of it, the music, everything. And then I think there was a Snow White done recently in like the 2000s, 2024, 2023, something like that.
I think it just came out, a few months ago. And I've heard, I haven't seen it, but I've heard they kind of missed the mark on everything. Like it doesn't satisfy the original Brothers Grimm version, but it also doesn't. It tries to modernize it and loses a lot of the messages. Again, this is only what I've read some pretty critical pieces on it. I haven't read anything good about it.
Yeah, the first one was, again, just a very, I don't know, it kind of, there's an optimism to it. There's a beauty to it. There's an innocence to it. The way that she looks and the way that she is in the forest. I mean, I recall she goes to sleep, she eats the apple, which I guess is a sort of an allegory of almost like a Christian theme. And the prince brings her back to life by kissing her, kind of the shortcut.
That's the Disney version for sure. And the tough part about modernizing these things, for a 2025 audience, is a lot of these are, pretty sexist. Like I said, I mean, the idea that a woman has to be rescued. So a lot of times what they'll try to do to modernize them is make the hero, make the girl in the story kind of self-sufficient. Well, then you're messing with the whole structure, the whole architecture of the story.
And the motivations. Like, if she's so independent, why does she even need this guy?
Exactly. So once you start doing that, the whole thing may fall apart.
Yeah.
In the original version, like I mentioned, the evil queen was Snow White's biological mother, and she was, remember, she has the magic mirror, and she would say, "Who's the fairest of them all?"
Yeah.
And forever, the mirror would always say, "Well, of course it's you, Queen. You're the most beautiful." And then one day, when the Snow White kind of gets older, she says, "Well, Snow White's the prettiest," and that was her daughter. And she was so jealous of that, she hired a huntsman to kill Snow White and bring back her lung and liver as proof that she killed her. Like, that is not a Disney.
Right. Because that's how you can really tell a person who a person is by, oh yeah, that's Alex's lung.
But it's her daughter too.
Yeah.
So, the huntsman finds Snow White, and he's so like creeped out by this that he tells Snow White to run away. He kills an animal instead, brings it to the queen, and she eats the lung and liver of that animal. Snow White, in the meantime, hides with 7 dwarfs who, in the original story, they didn't have individual personalities or names or anything like that.
It wasn't like Sleepy dwarfs. And Dopey and all that.
That was the Disney version. In the original, the queen tries to kill her 3 times. Once by a corset that she pulls too tight and tries to like suffocate her.
Oh yeah.
The second time with a poison comb, and then finally the third time with the poison apple.
Okay.
When in the original, when the prince tries to find her, when the prince finally finds her and the dwarfs like hiding out, he doesn't kiss her. His servants jostle the coffin, and the apple dislodges from her throat, and she comes back to life. There was no kiss or
Ah.
anything. And then in the original, at her wedding, so the evil queen goes to the wedding. She didn't know it was her daughter that was getting married, and the prince, once she gets there, she discovers that, and the prince and Snow White force the queen to wear red hot iron. They take shoes and they put them in the fire. They're made of iron. They put them in the fire until they're red hot and make her dance until she dies. Again,
Wow.
it's all about comeuppance. Like, if you are mean, you will get yours in the end. It might be a long time before you get yours, but you will get yours 100 times worse than you gave. And they made her dance on with these red hot iron shoes until she died.
That was the original version of the
Yeah.
ABBA song, right? Dancing
Now,
Queen.
now you in the second edition, all they did was change it to her stepmother, and instantly it becomes a more morally acceptable story.
Palatable, yeah.
I suppose, because nobody would do that to their real daughter, but a stepmother, I guess
She might.
anything goes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then in the Disney version, they made the dwarves have personalities, and the prince kisses her, and it becomes much more of a kind of love at first sight
Romance.
kind of
and love conquers all kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, what about Hansel and Gretel?
I don't know much about them.
So
They fetch a pail of water. Is that them?
no, that was Jack and Jill.
Oh,
All they did was go up a hill and then roll down. That's a real short story.
yes.
Hansel and Gretel were the ones that were in the forest and dropped breadcrumbs, remember? And then the witch caught them.
Oh, yeah.
So Hansel and Gretel, in the original version, a couple is starving and they have 2 kids, Hansel and Gretel. And the wife says, we don't have enough to eat. Let's leave our kids here in the woods so we don't have as many mouths to feed. So it's just going to be you and me. And then Hansel, the boy, overhears the plan and drops pebbles on his way so that he can find his way back. So he gets back. So the wife says, let's try it again. Let's try it again. Let's try to lose these guys again. This time he drops breadcrumbs and the birds eat the breadcrumbs.
I remember that.
Then they found a house made of gingerbread where a witch lived. And the witch put Hansel in a cage to fatten him up so she could eat him. And she made Gretel do chores. The witch decided to eat Hansel, and Gretel shoves the witch into the oven. They steal her gold, and then they go back home, and they find the mother had died and the father's alive, and he didn't want to go along with this anyways. He welcomes them back, and they live happily ever after. In subsequent versions, the mother becomes a stepmother, and again, it's the stepmother that doesn't want the kids. The father is in an impossible situation, but he welcomes them, and then all 3 of them live happily ever after at the end. These constant themes, though, I mean, imagine if you had a book of, we're just talking about some of these stories, but if there were 86 stories, after time after time after time, it's an evil stepmother and an evil stepsisters, and
they get a little repetitious.
But that was probably very common back then to have step sisters and brothers and parents, because people were, didn't live very long back then. And as
families got melded together, it's like the Brady Bunch.
I don't even know about melted together, but women died in childbirth a lot. So there would be another woman that would take the place, usually a younger woman, probably, if you go by like Henry VIII times, every wife is a little bit younger, right?
True.
I could see how somebody would resent them maybe. But like I say, didn't do step parents any favors.
No, step parents got a bad rap.
What about Rumpelstiltskin?
No idea.
Nothing?
Isn't that... No, I'm thinking of Pinocchio. Nope, no idea.
So a miller, and there were lots of millers in these stories. You know what a miller is?
They make flour?
They would take like straw. Yeah, they would mill like flour from like straw and barley and things like that.
Okay.
And it would have these wheels, right? Spinning wheels.
Yeah,
they would do that.
A mill.
So a miller wanted to impress a king. So he lies to him and says, "My daughter can spin straw into gold."
Oh, yeah. I've heard that saying before.
So first of all, what? Like that sentence doesn't even make any sense. But okay. So the greedy king brings the daughter to the castle, locks her in a room with straw, gives her a spinning wheel, and says, "All right, I heard that you can make this into gold, but if you have, so I'm skeptical. If you haven't spun the straw into gold by the morning, you die." As kings do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's always
My
such
loyal
like
subject.
consequences. So all of a sudden, a little man appears out of nowhere and he says, "I can help you. I can spin that into gold." He does. He spins it into gold, and she says, "Oh my gosh, thank you. You saved my life." And he says, "Well, I'll take your necklace though." So she gives him her necklace. Next night, he does the same thing. And he says, "I'll take your ring." Took the ring. Next night, he says the same thing, and this time she doesn't have anything to give him. He says, "Well, promise me your firstborn child."
Of course.
So the king is so impressed by all this gold that he marries the girl. She becomes the queen. Year later, she has a baby, and all of a sudden, the little man comes back. And he says, "You promised." She says, "Please, can I keep this child? He's the heir to the throne. Please let me keep him." He says, "All right, but on one condition. You can keep the baby if you can guess my name within 3 days from now." Now, his name was Rumpelstiltskin, right?
Yeah.
So she guesses, and she guesses some names like Casper. No, it's not Casper. Is it Melchior? No. Is it Schnoodlepuff? No, it's not Schnoodlepuff. Now, this is a great story to tell your kids. You could just, at this point, just make up names, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So then she overhears him one day. He's out back singing, and he's singing a song. "Today I bake, tomorrow I brew, the next I'll have the young queen's child." It probably rhymes in German. "Oh, how glad I am that no one knows that my name is Rumpelstiltskin."
Oh, and he's singing out
Rumpelstiltskin.
loud.
He's singing out loud, yeah. Rumpelstiltskin in German means noisy little goblin.
Okay. I didn't know that.
I think knowing that though, I might have guessed that right away.
Yeah, it's very descriptive.
Like if he is a noisy little goblin and he says, "I bet you can't guess my name," I'd be like, "Is it noisy little goblin?"
And it seems like being overheard is such a big, like several times somebody overhearing something changes the plot dramatically.
Well, yeah, and that's
It's
how
Machine of the Gods.
But even in Shakespeare, that's how it happens,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like
true.
that's So she confronts him. She goes, "Ah, your name is Rumpelstiltskin," and he screams in rage and runs away. And that's the end. And in subsequent versions, he literally tears himself into two. Like he runs away and he splits in half right down the middle. I don't know
Some
why
kind
that's
of
funny.
strange
It's so funny
amoeba
to me.
or yeah. That's
So those were the popular ones. I told you there's other ones that are just downright weird. There's one about a girl who ends up marrying like a serial killer and sets him up for and there's fingers being chopped off and salting the meat and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just, but we've talked about before when we talked about at Christmas. Yeah, we talk about those. It's very common to have stories where people are eaten and boiled and salted, and that was a thing that genuinely scared people back then.
Yeah, that was a horror film. They didn't have special effects, so they had to pick a topic that was very visceral.
But it's just funny because we would never tell little kids the stories today, and I think kids dug it. Like I think kids are into that kind of stuff.
That's why they were tougher than us.
Yeah, I guess so.
And now, a 1785 kid could beat the crap out of a 1985 kid.
So we have these common tropes of wicked stepmothers, abandoned children, talking animals, making a deal with the devil, making a deal with the goblin, rules of three, like 3 wishes, 3 tests, 3 brothers, gruesome karmic justice, right? I should probably, though, a podcast about the Brothers Grimm probably would be incomplete if I didn't talk about kind of the anti-Semitic tropes. I talked about only some of the stories that we know. there were other stories that were very, very anti-Semitic. When those guys lived in the 1800s, this anti-Semitism was starting to rise in Germany. Um, Jews were often the villains in these stories. They were repeated from times where they blamed everything on the Jews, and unfortunately, that got even worse. Over the next 100 years. Well, Brothers Grimm weren't, like I said, they were not. They were scholars. They weren't fascists. They weren't propagandists. They weren't trying to propagate these stories. They were collecting stories from racist folks, bigoted people, right? Um, Unfortunately, 100 years, well, not quite 100 years later, when the Nazis were in charge, they deliberately used these Brothers Grimm stories as propaganda
And
tools.
people had grown up on them, right? So this was something
It
they
was
were all
easy to
familiar
do.
with.
It was
Yeah,
very
yeah.
easy to do because
I
they
hadn't
had
thought about
grown up
that.
with these stories, and they used them, and they really doubled down on using these Brothers Grimm stories in school. Hitler youth groups used these. They would have radio plays. They really got a second wave of popularity in the 30s and 1930s and 40s. They were German to the core. These stories, they were part and a country that was becoming more and more nationalistic. These stories were very comforting to Nazis and really used as tools. Um, a lot of these stories have to do with an evil outsider. Well, the immigrants and Jews were seen as evil outsiders, and there were also these stories. I think the most destructive thing was these stories were all about you better be obedient as a child or there's going to be consequences. If you don't
Yeah,
listen to what your parent, if you don't stop on the way home and don't do this or you'll get eaten by a witch. So they were really teaching kids to be super obedient. Well, part of imagine the end game of Nazis teaching you to be obedient is
yeah. To the
pretty
fear.
yeah, it's pretty chilling, right? Also, there was a glorification of suffering, right, in these stories, and that was a very Nazi thing too. The Little Red Riding Hood, the Nazis right away were like the wolf is the Jews. Um, and they would spell this out to little kids. Snow White was all about racial purity.
Yeah,
They were kind of taking what Brothers Grimm did and perverting it a little bit to make something that was already kind of really weird and strange and scary and gruesome, even into something more horrific and monstrous, right?
wow.
Um, and Hansel and Gretel was all about defeating evil through being resourceful, right?
Right,
Dropping the
right.
breadcrumbs, or and that's what they were all about. Is the world's up against us? We have to be resourceful and defeat these evil outsiders. So, unfortunately, the Brothers Grimm were used as a Nazi propaganda tool. Not that they weren't also probably bigoted themselves, but that wasn't the purpose for them writing it. Um, well, Disney, when Disney got involved, like I said, in 1937, a lot of people were making fun of Walt Disney for doing this. They originally, when they were making Snow White, um, some industry people were calling it Disney's folly. They thought this was going to be a disaster, making a feature
Yeah,
length
I heard that.
cartoon with singing and out of some German story. Nobody was going to go to that, and it became a huge hit. But that was 1937. Um, we've already talked in the Henry Ford episode about how there were people in the U.S. trying to propagandize Nazis. I'm sure Snow White didn't help in those causes either. I don't know for sure that these Disney Brothers Grimm movies had anything to do with why it took us so long to get involved in World War II, but maybe there's something to that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
those were the ones that I mentioned today were the ones we've heard of. There was dozens and dozens of others that
You
are
said a
lesser
total of
known.
80, 83,
86, I think, something like
86
that. Yeah.
stories that they translated. Wow.
Um,
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, I didn't even know they were real brothers, real people. I thought maybe it was just a made up name for those types of stories, or it was a genre versus people. So it's good to know.
and if you think of a story and you go, well, is that a Brothers Grimm or not? Like, is Goldilocks Brothers Grimm? Well, no one gets eaten, nobody dies, nobody is impaled, nobody's boiled. No, it turns out that's a British story.
Hmm.
That's not that's not one. Now, I would have thought maybe the Three Little Pigs, but I don't think that one is either. I mean, a lot of these stories, unless they end up with somebody kind of being boiled in their own pudding.
Well, and I guess also did you talked about the animals being helpful characters or hurtful characters like the wolf, but were there any stories that starred animals that were Brothers Grimm, like the Three Little Pigs? They're the stars of the show, but weren't Brothers Grimm's mostly people?
There was one where there was a fish that got 3 wishes.
It was called Wishes for Fishes.
One of his wishes was to be the Pope, and he ended up being the Pope. There's some wild stuff out there, man.
Wow.
He ended up being the actual Pope, a fish. And then the stories, a lot of these stories would just end, and like there's no moral, and it just kind of is like just seems incomplete. The ones that we know about are the hits for a reason. Like they're very complete stories with good like beginning, middle, and end. Some of their stuff, honestly, is kind of trash.
Just filler.
Like the fish one.
Like the fourth song on the B side of a Journey album.
Sure. Or I know that you're involved with the Star Wars. I hear that not all those are great, right?
Yeah. Definitely some filler there.
Yeah.
Well, if you like stories that are all killer and no filler, Dirt Nap City. That's where you should be.
Yeah. So next time you put your kids to bed, I would recommend of all these, the one that goes down the easiest is Rumpelstiltskin. There's nobody really getting boiled or anything, and you can kind of make it how you want. And the fun part is
all the funny names.
When she's guessing the names, you can go 15 minutes on that.
Yeah.
And kids will sit there and listen to it because they don't want to go to bed. So you can make these stories as long as you want.
And this is the 1812 version of all these.
No. Well, the Rumpelstiltskin, I don't think was that bad. I mean, I wouldn't maybe say the part about how he split himself in half or anything, but I don't think there's anything that objectionable. I mean, maybe I think a kid can, even a 5-year-old can even handle like, if you don't spin this into gold, you die. I think they. If
we grew up watching Harry or Freddy Krueger and RoboCop, I think kids can handle the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah, I would recommend Rumpelstiltskin as one to read to your you don't have to read it, just from memory. Kids will love it. It's an oldie but a goodie.
Or just if you want to tell your kid a story, just let play the part where Alex read Little Red Cap. Just play that on repeat.
Little Red Cap.
It was a good reading.
Thank you.
Two brothers walked the shadowed woods. Lie, 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 lie. Collected tales where darkness stood. Lie, 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 lie. A poisoned kiss, a bite of sin. Lie, 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 lie. The linked world of old begins. Once upon a grim they spun. Stories not for everyone. Wicked sisters, curses grim. A moral waits in every hymn. A stepmother with eyes of stone. Aye, 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 aye. Turned hearts to ice, made them her throne. Aye, 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 aye. A huntsman's blade, a wolf's disguise. Aye, 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 aye. Forest echoes with their lies. Oh, child, beware the spindles prick. The apple's sweet, but death comes quick. Once upon a grim they spun. Stories not for everyone. Wicked sisters, curses grim. A moral waits in every hymn. The woods are deep, the paths are thin. What hides beneath the fairy skin? A castle grand or iron cage. Each story turns another page. Always, always, always. Once upon a Grimm they spun stories not for everyone. Wicked sisters, curses grim, a moral waits in every hymn. Once upon a Grimm they spun stories not for everyone. Wicked sisters,